Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it.
Well, on that note, now that Bruce has let all the air out of himself, now he can start.
A deflating experience.
Yes, it was. That was unfortunately, I turned the button on afterwards, but we had a moment here in the studio where Mr. Kelly had to let all the air out of himself before he could relax enough.
That's because we're so high up on the building.
Yeah, we're so high up on the building, and you're excited about tonight's interview, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is an exclusive.
Yes, it is.
I think it's our first ever AML. You know what, Mr. Wilson? Mail boy.
Hello.
You know what? This is our first. What? This is our first exclusive since the last exclusive.
Holy cow! Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think it's our first ever exclusive.
I think you may be correct there.
I'm actually starting to have thoughts about contacting Rod Stewart.
Go for it.
Oh, yeah, I know. Definitely. Well, no kidding. I know everybody's going to say go for it, but I have. I don't want to. I want to approach it. I'm trying to figure out. Do I say? Obviously, you've listened to all of our podcasts.
Obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. Otto, could you go back into the green room, please?
Yeah, go back. You haven't been...
See, even he's all excited about it.
Yeah, as soon as he heard it. Yeah, well, okay. So let's introduce everybody. Tonight is episode, don't tell me. I'm going to look. I think it's episode 116. It's February the 18th. That much I do know.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure it's episode 116. Let me just check. Otto gets a new job. It is. It's episode 116. So let me introduce everybody. We have Tony Cook, who is the editor of Model Railroad News, the creator of HO Collector Quarterly, the guy that runs HO Scale Resource, the author of Model AML Product News on the old AML network, and of course the new sensational show, the X2F Files. Is there anything you don't do, Tony?
You forgot one of my favorite things, though. That I'm the proud owner of.
Yeah, a 1990.
95 red Eldorado. That is the official AML Exec 1 car.
Yeah, Exec 1.
Did you get the new license plates for it?
I think I can get antique plates, believe it or not, as of this year that it hits the 25-year mark. So, yes, when I get antique plates, I'm looking for AML Exec 1 to see if it's available.
So has it turned over 28,000 miles yet?
No, believe it or not, I've kept the miles off, although this ratty weather we've had, I think the last time Shane Mason and I headed out for a tour of the hobby shops, maybe November or early December, is the last time she's turned a wheel. I mean, the weather's been such that I don't always get the Lincoln out that much. So the Caddy's definitely been on ice, literally, all winter.
Well, let me ask you a question that I was asking a couple of weeks ago when the temperature here where we were was well below 0 Fahrenheit. I think it was probably around 15 below Fahrenheit. And my son's battery in his car died. So, of course, he asked Dad to help. And we got it in the garage. And, of course, we were banging our knuckles and everything because you're working so fast because you're freezing to death and your bare hands and blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, and maybe you would know this, Tony, because you're a man of the world. You have a lot of automobiles. You have a collection of automobiles.
Yeah.
Why is it that car batteries die on the coldest day of the year?
Yeah, why don't they do that like in June or July when it would be so much more convenient?
Yeah.
I don't know. Although, actually, I think when I changed batteries in that Lincoln, it was like July or August. So I guess that's part of owning a Lincoln, that its battery will die conveniently on
yeah, yeah, they have in the computer console, in the computer, they have it. So, okay, this battery's going to die in the middle of January, so we'll just turn it off now.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Lincoln uses batteries not made by the Murphy Battery Company.
Yeah, exactly. That voice you hear is none other than Bruce, the mail boy, the moderately agitated mail boy.
Yes.
And Bruce, as is customary on the show, I always have something to apologize to you for.
Okay.
So today I'm going to apologize for getting so worked up about our plans to go see a Chicago Cubs game.
I took all that in account, knowing what you're going through, and it's no big deal, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Well, and I'm not taking it back. I'm just apologizing.
Well, yeah, I know that.
Like, send the message again and see what happens.
Yeah.
And finally, all the way from Medford, Oregon, is Bruce Kelly, who is the very, very first super fan. He's the creator of the Kelly Questions. He's the president of every model railroad club within 102 miles of Medford, Oregon. None other than Bruce S. Kelly.
Hello.
And do you guys know why we're gathered here tonight?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very exciting.
It is exciting.
It is exciting.
It is. Are you excited, Tony?
It is big news.
Is
Although
she-
it's big news I've known, but yes, it's very exciting.
Yes, and this is the first ever public interview with this gentleman since this news. So let's go get him somebody get him out of the green room.
I think Tony should have.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I will go get him in the green room because, actually, I think we had a little miscommunication and busted knuckle. Did you realize who's back in the green room?
No.
Well, I guess for some reason, rather than this welcoming Otto Vondrak thing, somebody thought this was like a Bob Hope's USO tour show. And I ran into Barbara Eden and a couple other people back in the green room. And
Nice.
And said, that's not tonight. So I'll go see. I don't know. Otto's probably back there getting I Dream of Jeannie autographs and things. So I'll see if I can get him to break away and come up for a while.
Connie Stevens.
Yeah.
I did see her. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to tell you, we just landed in Da Nang, and I don't know what those planes are doing, but when they flew in low.
I think Don DeLuise is back there too, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh,
Tom would
man.
go occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Charo would go.
Yeah.
Charo, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Gucci.
Any luck? Have you found him, or did he leave?
No, I'm still trying to sort through. Oh, there he is. Okay.
He's pocketing the shrimp.
Hey. You said these shrimps was free.
Yeah. Did you take a close look at them?
Yes.
I know, never had Canadian shrimp before. I'm kind of wary, but you guys are hosts. You guys are good hosts. I'm not complaining. Thanks for having me back.
They're fresh from Lake Simcoe.
Yeah. They got the taste of bacon and maple syrup.
This would be a great Bruce. This would be. Can I tell my snowmobile joke on about Lake Simcoe?
Oh, certainly. Why not? Because it's perfect time of year for it. Well, actually, a little early, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Bruce and I live north of Toronto in a town called Barrie, Ontario, and we live on the shore of a very large freshwater lake. It's like 30 miles across at its widest point, and about 30 miles long, and it's a very very big lake, about 30, 40, 50 miles north of Toronto. So anyways, last summer there were these three guys, these three fellas, let's say they are from the far east coast of Canada, somewhere near St. John's, Newfoundland. And they were fishing on the bay of Barrie, Ontario. And there's this big long bay. And they're fishing and they're not catching anything. And they troll around from the south side of the bay to the north side of the bay. And all of a sudden they start catching lake trout. So the one fella turns to the other fella and says, "Hey, should we anchor here?" And the guy says, "Yeah." So they throw out the anchor, and the chain wraps around the leg of the one fella, and over the side he goes. So now there was three guys in the boat, and the third guy's gone out of the boat. And bubbles are coming up, and the other two guys are staring at him, and the second guy says, "Well, I guess I'll dive in." And he dives in, and Another 30 or 40 seconds or a minute goes by, and finally he surfaces, and he's got the third guy, and they drag him into the boat. But of course he's unconscious now, so the first starts to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and he jumps up and he goes, "Man," he says, "I don't remember Bob having such bad breath." And now the other guy goes, "Yeah, I don't remember him wearing that snowmobile suit either."
Otto, would you like to go back to the green room?
Well, unfortunately, my Uber's not going to be here for another hour, so
All right.
Did you
I
do?
guess we'll go on then.
Did you do Uber X or did you share?
I shared. It was cheaper that way. Yeah, we're on a tight budget here at White River, so I like to conserve wherever we can.
So you're gonna
Well,
have
that's the impression everyone gets. Everyone's like, they only can afford like 2 people on staff, and they can't travel in the same airplane at the same time because what if something happens and then the entire staff of Railfan and Railroad goes down in flames, or some say we already have. Either way,
Otto, move your microphone just a little bit away from your mouth, please, and thank you, so we can hear you.
It tastes so good.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that's fine. So we have
shrimp sauce on it.
Yeah, we have.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. His whole mouth, his face is covered with shrimp shots. So we have Otto Vondrak is our special guest tonight. Otto Vondrak, who, of course, everyone knows as the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman. How do you like that?
Say what?
They don't know that. They know him as Railfan Railroad. They now will know him.
I know. That's the exciting news.
I mean,
And
I
what-
barely know.
And what I want answered, first and foremost, Otto, did you take this job because you're trying to get away from Railfan Railroad because they won't do Lionel's suggestion of 1 month it's Railroad Railfan, the next month it's Railfan and Railroad? Are you getting frustrated that we can't get that pushed through for that title change every other month?
No, we're still working on that.
Okay.
That's still in production.
Okay.
Top men are working on that.
So
Top men.
So are you guys now that we have the editor of Model Railroad News with us and we have the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman with us, are you guys now going to be like working hand in hand, or are you going to be more like the FBI and the CIA where you don't tell each other stuff because you're constantly trying to make your magazine better than the other guys?
If the CIA put out a model railroad magazine, I would like to read that.
So how did this all came about? Because the current editor of Railroad Model Craftsman has left the building, and now so they needed a new guy, and obviously Mr. Udaly took my advice because I thought that you were the obvious choice for this job, Mr. Vondrak.
That's really flattering. It's something I've had a hard time actually like really adjusting to this. We had a lot of talk about it, and I've been working with the staff and getting ready for my first issue, which is going to be the May 2019 issue. Is going to be my first official issue as editor. And it's interesting when Stephen Priest announced that he was departing for another job. He calls me up and he's like, "I'd really like it if you would take my place. I think you would be a really good candidate for this." And I'm like, "I am super flattered that you thought of me, but I can't believe that I'm anyone's first choice for anything." So, just kind of, and the company was looking at several candidates, I'm sure. And it's just kind of amazing that I keep telling people it was such a long, strange journey, and I wasn't expecting to ever be here. One of the things, and I think I was talking to you offline another time, Lionel, about how, our passions really drive us, and you can tell when someone's really excited about what they're doing because it comes out in their work.
Right.
And I think sometimes we're afraid to admit that. We have to be adults. We have to have some discretion and decorum, and you want to be modest and all that. But ever since I'm a little kid, I've wanted to work for a railroad magazine. And I think that sounds very oddly specific, but I grew up reading this magazine, not sure you've heard of it. It's called Model Railroader.
Yes, I believe I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yes. I'm 6 years old, and I found a copy of Model Railroader in my elementary school library. And I was just shocked that there was a magazine about trains, let alone model trains. And my dad had just given me a train set, and I was just starting my little model railroading journey. And now here was this big, colorful magazine, coming to the doorstep every month. And over the years, reading that magazine and then finding other magazines, and then just find that there's a whole world out there, it got me interested in magazine design. It got me interested in photography. Got me interested in graphic arts. My mother was a graphic designer, and she had a whole library of art and design books too. And my dad was a creative person as well. And I think just all those factors together, and I was such an avid reader when I was a kid. I think it just made such an impression. And I thought, this is what I want to do someday. I want to work. I'd love to work for a magazine. I'd love to work for a train magazine. And my first published article in a national magazine was actually in Railroad Model Craftsman.
Oh, that's cool.
It was, I think it was August 2000. It was an article I did about the Rochester subway, and discussing the prototype and then showing how you could build a model railroad based off the subway. And that was my first foray into that kind of publishing. I'd been published in other places like Rail Pace and some other smaller outlets, but RMC was actually my first break into the national market. And then getting that article published, I had supplied some line drawings with the article, and the editor at the time was Bill Schomburg, and he's like, "Hey, I noticed these drawings. Would you be willing to do stuff like this on a regular basis? We could hire you as a freelancer." And so I started doing technical drawings and track plans for Railroad Model Craftsman, and that blossomed into contributing more stories. And then I got involved doing some work for Railfan and Railroad, and also another magazine called CTC Board, which is now Railroads Illustrated. A few other magazines. I just started getting involved more and more. You start making connections, you start networking, and all this time I'm working as a graphic designer. And my full-time job was starting to shut down. The advertising agency was closing down that I was working for. But by this time, I was racking up so many hours doing freelance work for Karstens. I just had them hire me full time, and I got to join the staff of Railfan and Railroad in 2010. And I thought that was it. I'm like, wow, this is it. I'm the associate editor of a railroad magazine. This isn't quite where I thought I was going to end up, but cool. Like that's it, And I thought I was doing well, and I was having fun. And it's interesting when you start publishing too, and you start making connections with other people in the industry, not just the train manufacturers and railroad museums and things like that, but everyone thinks that the railroad publishing industry, we're all at each other's throats,
Right.
and we're not. I mean, the accountants maybe our accountants we're competing for advertising dollars, but personally, like, it's not like the editor of Trains and the editor of Railfan are having a feud. And you start making friends, in the industry. And I have a lot of friends over at Camback, and over the years, I've gotten to peek over the fence and see how they do things, and it's just all very interesting. I thought this was it. I work for Railfan. I work on a couple other side projects. This is it. This is the top.
Right.
So I didn't really expect anything else to happen. And, like I said, I've always been interested in the history of the hobby and the history of our publications. And, I'm always talking to Tony about different aspects of history. I'm into graphic design, having gone to school for graphic design at Rochester Institute, the prestigious Rochester Institute of Technology.
Yes.
Which is where I earned my degree. And I've always been interested in graphic arts. And Tony and I will be talking about things like, packaging changes for Tyco, or how this company bought that die and started doing this mold. And all that stuff gets lost to history, as Tony will tell you. Like, he's piecing together several stories right now, because even our recent history is just getting lost because no one ever thought to save it, right?
Yeah.
And, growing up, I think, all of us here in the studio today, we've all grew up reading Model Railroader at one time or another, right?
Yep.
And I kind of feel like, over the years, they've done a very good job of preserving and marketing their heritage. Their heritage is very important. And I think everybody knows the legend of Al Cambeck producing the first issue of Model Railroader in the depths of the Depression, and the whole history of that company, because there's been some legendary names that came out of that magazine. And I've had a very hard time ever since I started working for Karstens. I've been trying to piece together the history of the company and the magazines. And I was telling someone the other day, that Railroad Model Craftsman was founded in 1933 by a guy named Emmanuel Sterry. And then yada, 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 a bunch of years later, now I'm editor.
Yeah.
That's the whole history.
Yeah.
And Otto, which editor are you? I heard you say this. I don't know if you said it to me the other day or you posted it somewhere. You're number 8.
I think I'm number 8, and this is the confusing part, because there's only been a few editors at Railroad Model Craftsman, but there's been a number of managing editors. So I really need to go back through some of the magazines and double check that number. There only have been just very few editors. You had Emmanuel Sterry, who was the founding editor in 1933, and he wasn't a model railroader per se. He was a very prolific how-to writer of the 1930s. And within a year or so of founding the magazine, he sold it to Charles Penn. And Charles Penn brought the magazine from Chicago to New York City. And Charles Penn technically was the editor through the 1950s, almost to the 1960s. Hal Karstens joined the staff in the mid-50s, and before that he was a frequent contributor to the magazine. He joined as an associate editor, worked his way up to managing editor, and at some point he purchased the company from Charles Penn when he retired, and then Hal Karstens assumed the mantle of editor. And I think the next major change came in, I think it was 1968, when Tony Custer joined the staff. And originally Tony Custer joined the staff as an associate editor, worked his way up to managing editor, and I'd have to see when he actually got the title of editor. I know this is all very technical, but I find it interesting. There was also a couple of editors in the 1940s, the Thompson brothers. They held the post at various times as well, but they were managing editors. And then in 1981, Bill Schomburg became editor of Railroad Model Craftsman. He was our longest-serving editor. He was editor for more than 30 years.
I was going to say he was in there for a long time.
It was the same core group of Bill Schomburg, Chris D'Amato, and Jim Engstrom. They were the three guys for like 30 years. They put out Railroad Model Craftsman. So that was a very stable, part of the history. There wasn't a lot of change. And then it wasn't until White River acquired the magazine from Karstens in 2014. That's when Stephen Priest came in, and then somehow by some stroke of fate, here I am sitting in the editor's chair. It's very bizarre.
Well, was the magazine, when you mentioned the guy who first started, how he was not a railroader? Is it first? I think I have some really old issues, and we've talked about this. It was the Model Craftsman.
Correct. Yeah, the magazine was launched as the Model Craftsman, and it was more about home workshop projects you could do, and there was a lot of hobby stuff in there. And there was model railroading articles in there, but there were also articles on how to build toy boats and how to build scale models of racing cars and handy workshop tips of the 1930s. Wasn't till 1948 that they made the magazine exclusively model trains. And then it just kind of evolved. You had Hal Karstens, who came from a tin plate background. And I always used to joke that in the 50s and 60s, if there was such a thing as tin plate HO, that's kind of like what Railroad Model Craftsman was promoting. And it really wasn't until Tony Custer came on board and he kind of steered the magazine more towards true scale modeling. And you see a change where more prototype features are coming in, more modern methods for construction articles, things like that. And it wasn't that Craftsman was a bad magazine. What I always tell people who say that there's not room for two magazines in the market, it's that both magazines have always spoken with very distinct voices. Model Railroader and Railroad Model Craftsman are both promoting the hobby of model trains, but we both do it in very different ways. And I think that's what people gravitate to.
Right.
Now, it's unfortunate that I'm surprised they didn't choose somebody that would be more enthusiastic.
Oh, man.
You know,
Well, it's interesting. Like I said, I thought I reached the top. I'm like, look, I work for Railfan. This is great. I'm enjoying everything I'm doing. I love working with Steve Barry. Love working with all the authors. This is great. And when they began searching for candidates for an editor, yes, it's always something that's been in the back of my head. Like, wow, it would be great if I could do that.
Right.
And I never really thought that was something I should really pursue. And especially with, I already have the position at Railfan, gonna make it a little difficult. And, some time went by, they interviewed some candidates, things didn't work out for one reason or another. And I had a lot of people come up to me and they asked me, what's happening, what's going on. And, I said, well, we're still working through it. I'm sure we have some candidates we're working through. I'm not really privy to the whole process. Frankly, it's none of my business. And, a few people, they're like, you should put your hat in the ring. And I'm like, that's very nice. I didn't really understand, what they were trying to tell me. And then actually I'd given up on the whole prospect. I'm like, well, we'll just find out who the editor is. I'm just going to sit back and watch this whole process unfold. I didn't even really give it a second thought. And then it was actually Stephen Priest who calls me up again a second time. I'm driving back from the big show at Springfield, and he calls me up a second time, and he says, I just got off the phone with Kevin, and we just had a very long talk, and you really need to talk to him about being the next editor. And I'm like, you're really flattering me, and I really appreciate what you're telling me, but I don't think Kevin's interested. I figured if he was interested, he'd call me up and we'd talk about it. He's like, well, we talked about it, and you need to talk to him right now. So I'm like, okay. And my friend Super Dave is in the car sitting next to me. We're driving back to good old Rochester, New York, and we're in the middle of the Berkshires on the Massachusetts Turnpike. So I'm like, all right, let me at least wait till I get to the other side of the mountains till we get a good cell signal. And then, I called up Kevin, and we chatted a little bit, and then we set up an interview for later in the week. And then he's like, great, sounds good. You start next week. and he hung up, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, what just happened?
So
Wow.
on the one hand, I'm super excited. On the other hand, it's like, crap, now I actually have to do something. But fortunately, we have a really great staff here at White River. I'll be working with Harry K. Wong. He is staying on as our associate editor. He is based in San Francisco. And you think I have enthusiasm. Have you talked to Harry lately?
No, we should. We should.
Harry is delightful, and he is just full of such enthusiasm. He's a very experienced Southern Pacific modeler. He's big into diesel detailing and modeling. And he also handles all of our product news reviews and also our book reviews. Mm-hmm. So he's going to be handling that aspect. We're going to be developing story ideas together. And he's got his contacts out on the West Coast. I'm going to be exploiting some of my contacts out here in the East. Got a pipeline of material coming in that Stephen Priest had gathered up and hadn't used in the magazine yet. So we have that. But I'm looking forward to working with Harry. We already have a plan for the next few issues that we're putting together. Also working with us is Todd Gillette. He's our graphic designer. He's doing our all of our production and layout design. And so pretty much I'll be working with Todd and Harry each month, planning out the issues and hopefully putting out magazines people want to read.
Coming from the prototype side of the industry as you are now and switching over to the modeling side, what do you figure is going to be the biggest difference / challenge in that?
It's interesting. So for those who don't know, I'm actually keeping both jobs, mostly because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Holy
Um,
moly!
So yes, I'm actually staying on as associate editor of Railfan and Railroad, and taking on editor of Railroad Model Craftsman.
Holy
And
shit.
I used to, yeah, right, yeah, that's what that goes through my brain like every 5 minutes. Like, holy crap, what am I doing?
Man,
But
so, so when are you going to be editor of Model Railroad at the same time?
Yeah.
It's going to be like,
we're projecting about 2 to 3 years. No, that's not a thing. That's not a
Okay,
thing at
all right. You know what?
But-
Just before you go on, and I know I shouldn't do this, but Bruce, as we said earlier, like I try to keep the show as transparent as possible, and I probably shouldn't repeat this. I don't know if it's okay, but Tony said to me in confidence, if he thinks he's going to get my job, he's barking up the wrong tree.
See, I'm just wondering now if because Mr. Cook is holding down editorial positions at a couple publications, maybe that's why Otto figured he had to keep both.
Oh,
I
yeah.
got to keep pace with Tony. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But no, I
Ot-
think I've joked with. I'm sorry.
Otto's titles are both monthly, and he also still does our web and social media.
Wow.
And whenever I have questions about layout for Model Railroad News or HO Collector, I'll say, "Hey, Otto, how do I do this? Or why can I not get that to do this other thing?" And he'll help me with. If you'll look at HO Collector, he's listed as graphics that he helps me with that too. So I need to try to keep up with Otto. The real truth.
And I have to apologize to you guys if I've been running off in like one continuous sentence. It's because I am very excited, but also very, very nervous about just everything. Just the schedule we can keep. That's no problem. I've worked out the scheduling with everyone, but really, like Bruce said, there are some challenges to crafting a message each month that people want to read. And I've joked with Lionel that sometimes my pendulum swings from prototype railfan side back to model railroading side, and that swings back again because I've been active in both worlds for a long time. Been active in our local NMRA off and on here over the years, and been involved in convention planning for many years for different groups. So that's when I get really involved in the model railroading side, and then it swings back to I'm doing work with the museum in Rochester, or I'm chairing some NRHS convention, or something's going on. It swings back to the prototype side, and then we need to generate some content for Model Craftsman. So here I am building a project layout with George Riley, and so I'm constantly. I can't say I have my foot firmly in one world or the other, and I think it's always been that way. I became a rail fan, I think, because it helped my modeling.
Right.
Because you study the prototype to make your modeling better, or to learn how to make your modeling as realistic as you can. And one of the things I struggle with a lot of times in the rail fan world, people who aren't into model trains at all, they just look down on model railroaders for one reason or the other. And I try to explain to them in many cases, model railroaders are bigger rail fans than you are because they are concerned about every nut, every bolt, every paint scheme. What year did this come off? What year did this come on? They're concerned about the same things rail fans are concerned about. They're just applying it to their models, where a rail fan is applying it to their photography or their writing or their lantern collecting or whatever aspect of the hobby that rail fans are focused on. And I think that's the thing that is the common thread that ties us all together. We're all interested in the same things, and it's how we're applying it that doesn't make us different necessarily. It's just how we're exploring the same hobby in different ways.
So you've been the editor of Railfan and Railroad for how long, or an associate editor for how long?
Since 2011.
And along with that, you did like the Facebook stuff and a lot of the web stuff for White River Productions.
Yes.
And you worked on and a couple other. And now all of a sudden you're gonna you're not gonna get rid of any of that. And on top of that, you're going to add the whole job of being editor of a successful magazine.
Oh, and also, did I tell you this year I just got elected president of the Rochester and Genesee Valley Railroad Museum?
Oh man.
Well, forget that. How are you gonna add being the editor of a magazine to what you?
Are you kidding? Well, I know it's easy. No one reads this thing anyway. Come on. You said these shrimp are free, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Before we go too much farther, was there anybody in the room in particular that thought you would be good at this job? That maybe you may have sent you a message saying you'd be good at this job?
A couple.
Yeah, exactly. And
Well,
then
no, you know what? And here again, this is. I'm really trying to keep it all in perspective because, like I said, this is something I've always wanted to do, and I never thought in a million years I would be the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman, let alone any publication. And I had a lot of people saying like I should go for it, and it's like it's very nice to hear, and it was just one of those things I just put out of my head because I'm just like it doesn't. I just felt like it wasn't up to me. It felt like it was just a decision that was out of my hands. And I shouldn't even try. And when I was at Springfield, we're out there representing the company. And when White River does the Springfield show and we're walking the floor, we're all wearing these bright green sweatshirts that say White River Productions Train Crew. And I got my friends out there doing some social media canvassing, and Harry K. Wong was out there. And, so we're all out there, and everyone's just like, the question on everyone's lips, who's the new editor, because we hadn't made an announcement yet. And then halfway through the show, I start hearing people coming up to me. They're like, "Hey, Otto, I heard you're the new editor of Railroad Model Craftsman." And at first I'm like, God damn it, Lionel. Because I thought for sure between, Lionel or my friend Chris Stilson or anyone else who can't. I thought like they were just spreading rumors or saying, "Hey, if you see Otto walking around, poke him in the ribs and screw with him a little bit, right?" But it was just kind of funny. And then, like literally, like on the drive home from Springfield, the Udalys give me the opportunity to interview for the job, and so maybe there was some magic in that old top hat they found. I don't know, but.
Well, draw your memory back to Sunday afternoon or Sunday around noon in the Better Living Center.
Yes,
to a conversation that perhaps you and I may have had.
Yes, we're going back.
And I remember very vividly saying, looking up to you, and I've always looked up to you, Otto.
Well, I'm 6'6", Lionel.
Yeah, well, there's that too, and I'm shrinking. But I looked right at you and I said, "Man, you are the guy for this job." I looked at, and you're like very demure, you have that whole, you're very demure and like, "Oh, I don't think I could do it." And I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? He's perfect for this job. And sure enough, there you are. Now you have the job. You're going to be great at it.
Thank you. And I do believe your check should be clearing this week. So
yeah, exactly.
But no, and I do appreciate it. I did have a lot of people telling me, that I should consider it. And again, it was just something, it just didn't click with me. It was something I wanted to do. It was something I thought I could do, but I just didn't feel like, it didn't feel like the right time, or I didn't know what. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm really glad I'm here, because the most exciting thing that I can do, the thing that I love doing, and I do this all the time in Railfan, when we're looking for articles to feature in Railfan. We get plenty of people who submit to us, and we're always looking for people to contribute news, photos, feature stories, whatever it is. I love coming across someone's work and sending them an email, sending them a text, being like, "Found your photo online. This would be great in the magazine. How do we get you published in the magazine?" And they're like, "Who, me? Really? Wow,
yeah,
that's amazing."
That's cool. Yeah.
And, all weekend at Springfield, just going around looking at people's work, I was just thinking about stuff I could feature on the Craftsman website. Hey, how do we get you in the magazine? Because I was thinking about just how do we get articles in the pipeline for whoever the next editor is going to be. But I love just picking on people and just being like, "Hey, you do great work. How do we get you published?" And they're like, "Who, me?" It's
well,
so I love that.
Well, for people that don't, a lot of people who are listening don't know you personally, and I will I will give them a little bit of background. Otto is a gentleman. First and foremost, Otto is a gentleman. And I'm saying that because it's a precursor to my question, because I know part of what your answer will be. So there's nothing wrong with the magazine now, but an editor is like an artist. An editor puts his own touch on the magazine. Do you have any early thoughts about what kind of things or direction you want the magazine to go in, or?
Yes.
Would you like to share those with us?
Also, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, you know what? This is a great idea. This having a podcast is a great idea. I should have thought of this a long time ago.
What I'm trying to think about is, I think like you said, every editor puts their mark on the magazine, and I don't think there needs to be a lot of drastic change in the magazine. Stephen Priest did a great job of elevating the magazine and bringing in some quality content. I think the things I'm focusing on are, how do we reach more people? Because reaching more people will also help the bottom line and ensure that the magazine stays around for another generation. But also, we have to be cognizant of the changes in the hobby. And, right, kids, if we had a nickel for every time someone said the hobby is dying,
Right.
for whatever reason, and I'm just always quick to counter. And it happened. I get that comment from people of all ages. The hobby is dying. The hobby is dying. And I'll tell you that the comment probably comes from the fact that they are used to practicing and enjoying their hobby in a very specific way with their group of friends, their circle of comrades. And the fact that they don't see as many new people, or they're not seeing young people or whatever, or their circle is closing, they're losing members of their circle, they assume the hobby is dying. And maybe what they don't realize is that the hobby is not dying, it's growing, and it's growing in ways you can't see because you're not enjoying the hobby in the same way. I was involved in a college club for many years, and eventually I just aged out because I realized I have nothing to tell these kids.
Right.
It's, I have nothing relevant. I have very little relevant to tell these kids that are going to affect anything that they're doing today. And there's nothing wrong with the way that anyone is practicing the hobby. Someone wants to do some virtual 3D modeling and build, 3D computer models, and that's how they do their modeling. Great. They want to create models for shapeways and 3D printing and get things out into market that way, and that's how they do the hobby. Awesome. They run an online forum somewhere or a Facebook group, and it's them and 12 of their friends. Cool. There are so many different dimensions to the hobby that exist now that didn't exist 25 years ago or even 50 years ago. And I think that's hard for people to understand. And my challenge is to try to reach those people, because we're still using traditional methods of printing a magazine. And the way we market that magazine is we go to train shows, and we depend on word of mouth, and we depend on our dealer network, and we try to market the magazine the way we've always marketed it to people. What if we're not hitting all the right channels? What if we're not reaching the people who are creating the work? And going back to the example I used for Railfan, when I'm looking for new content, I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups that I don't have an interest in, but they're covering territories that I wouldn't ordinarily have contacts in, like Mississippi or Texas or Oklahoma, or,
Yeah.
I just don't have enough contacts. So I troll these Facebook groups. I'm like, ooh, great photo. Let's get in the magazine. Wow, you have a bunch of great photos. Let's turn that into an article. And same thing, I've joined a bunch of model railroading Facebook groups about things I might not have primary interest in, but it's a way to reach people that I wouldn't ordinarily have contact with. And this goes back to when I was a little boy reading Model Railroader and growing up reading, all those columns by Tony Custer. And you learned everything about how he built his railroad. I mean, you visited that column, you visited his layout every month. and you got to know his layout really well. And a lot of times Tony would share personal stuff about him, and you kind of got to know a little bit about his family and how he built his railroad and how he operated his railroad. And it's funny because I imagine just everyone got this real familiarity with it through that column. And it was just interesting that, I always wondered, oh, I wonder if I will meet this guy, Tony. How I'm an 8-year-old kid. How am I ever going to meet these people who are built, not just Tony, all the people in the magazine who are building these models, publishing these articles. How am I going to meet any of these people? I'm 8 years old. I'm 12 years old. I'm 14 years old. I don't have a car. I don't have any money. I barely have a computer. How do you meet other hobbyists? How do you grow in the hobby? And for me, I didn't know anyone else in the hobby, but at least I could read this magazine, and I got to know, I'm putting "know" in quotation marks, I got to know all of the regular contributors to the magazine. And it's funny, years later, I remember I was doing some article research, and someone's like, oh, well, why don't you just email Tony Custer? He has all the data on nickel plate, whatever that you're looking for. Here's his email. And I'm like, whoa, you just have Tony Custer's email? That's crazy. But this is like, 20 years later. And it's like, I guess the point I'm making is that used to be the only time you got to meet contributors to a magazine was at a convention, or, right. You had very few opportunities to meet these people. Now, today with the internet, you see someone's article, you can probably track them down in an hour's worth of sleuthing, or someone who knows them, because the internet has drawn us all together.
Yeah.
If I want to learn about New York Central diesels and compile rosters of all the Alco RS3s, well, I would have had to consult several books, get them through the library, track them down through card catalogs, whatever. I can do that research in an evening with a couple of keystrokes. I'm telling you all this to make the point that we need to change the way that we're reaching people. And it doesn't mean that we abandon the traditional ways that we already know and that we're comfortable with. It just means we have to augment and look for new ways to reach these people in addition to, because you don't want to alienate the people who are already on board.
Exactly. That's for sure. And let me tell you, I got 2 things to tell you about that. Number one, if you want people to notice you, try tooling around in a pearl red 95 Cadillac Eldorado. People will notice you at that point.
No, Tony got the exhaust fixed on that. It's good now.
And my other point is, I had this very discussion with Mr. Fugate a couple of months ago, and when we were interviewing him, we interview him every year for the State of the Hobby. And he wanted to talk about how he had found his adopted sisters and his adoptive family, and we got into that whole discussion. And then I said to him, and I kind of realized it, and it's the same thing here. This is part of the new world, because people would love to hear about you and hear about your discussions and all that, but it's not really very viable to put in a magazine. Like what we're doing tonight, you couldn't put in a magazine. It's just not viable. But part of the new world is now we have a podcast where we can interview the new editor of Railroad Model Craftsman. We can hear about his aspirations and how excited he is about becoming the editor, and it gives people a whole new it gives people an opportunity to learn more about you and perhaps enjoy the magazine even more.
Actually, I don't want them to learn too much about me because I want them to buy the magazine. So.
Well,
don't get to know me too well.
Yeah.
It gets a little scary when you start going down a couple of levels.
Yeah.
People start stalking you.
Yeah.
What you can do a paragraph each month in your editorial, and over the space of the next 15 years, they'll have your complete history there.
Right.
Well, and it's like I offer a lot of the stuff that I do. I'll offer to come, like whenever I interview David Leilbach from Tangent, I offer him his, and he puts it on his website. And I mean, it's a whole new world. And what you're talking about is learning to, like, what you need to do is learn to accept this new world that we live in. And the hobby is growing. It's absolutely growing. I was just having a conversation with Mr. Kelly there, who's the president of every model railroad club within 102 miles of Medford, Oregon. And actually, we're not kidding. He actually tries to become the president of everyone. And he was saying how his club is losing members in the park. But before I go on, you also have to realize the thing. He worries about mosquitoes that don't get enough to eat. But he's worrying about how the membership is leaving and dying off from his club. And I said, well, it's just a new world. The hobby's not going away. It's just you have to figure out a way to get people interested, because clubs were the only way to gather with people. And now
clubs were a very important social aspect, because clubs were the first Facebook groups, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And, if you were lucky to have a good club nearby, I think that definitely helped a lot of people. And if you didn't, you had to find other outlets. But I think it's, one of the things I think we have to be very honest with ourselves about what the hobby means to us and how we want to grow. And it's not so much that you just toss a 16-year-old the keys to the car and say good luck. You give him all the tools to succeed so he can be a safe driver. And then, through experience, he's going to be an even better driver. Same thing with model railroading. I think there's a certain segment of the population that believes if they don't buy the $300 locomotive, either they're not in the cool kids club or they're not doing the hobby right. And not that I'm trying to discourage anyone from buying $300 locomotives, but I think no one should feel shamed or discouraged if that's not in their budget right now. It was really eye-opening when I was in college and I helped start the Model Railroad Club at RIT. And, we all had jobs and we went to school and, we scraped just enough to get by to go to school and all that. And any fun money we had left over might be a beer once in a while, and it might be an Athearn kit. And that was our whole hobby. And I remember maybe 10 years later, coming back to the club, and now all the freshmen have like the latest $300 locomotive on the layout. And I'm like, how did you do that? I didn't have $300 for a locomotive when I was a freshman, but good on you. If that's, but I just hope that people realize that there's many ways to enjoy the hobby, and it's not buying the latest and greatest isn't the shortcut to success.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. I bet. Now, how involved are you with the covers of Railfan and Railroad? Because you're an associate editor there, so there's a full editor.
Right. I design the covers, and I also design all the features. Steve Berry takes care of all the columns.
Okay, because I've told you this before, and I'm looking at the February issue of Railfan and Railroad, and the covers are dramatic. You have made such a huge improvement on that magazine. The covers are like, and I've said that before, and I've said it on the air before. The covers are dramatic. So, I mean, I really look forward to what it is you're going to do with the magazine. So give us now, okay, so one of the things you're concerned about is how to reach people.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any ideas about how you might do that? Like, do you have
absolutely no clue. Yeah.
There you go. So you should be you should start a podcast. Or no, you know what? You should be on a podcast.
I should be on do you guys know a podcast I can be on?
Yeah.
I think a lot of what we've been talking about, it requires a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And fortunately, I've got, Harry's got his nose to the ground, and he's reaching out to his network, and he's scouring for content. I'm literally doing the same. I'm like joining every Facebook group I can, and I'm trying to meet people and encourage people to write. And I think that's one part of it. That is the grassroots guerrilla marketing aspect of it. And what I'm hoping is that in time, as we broaden the base of contributions, I have to do less, crawling through the internet, literally page by page looking for, and it's fun. It's fun, doing it, but also it's very time consuming. And there's a lot of aspects to the magazine. So I do take a bit of the day each day to, troll Facebook, troll the internet, see what's out there, and not just look for things that I like. You know, uh, I'm a fan of the New York Central. I'm a fan of Conrail. I'm a fan of diesels. Um, I'm also a fan of traction and trolleys and commuter trains. And I have some very interesting, diverse um, aspects of the hobby that I'm into. It can't just be what I like. If Harry comes up to me with something he's really excited about, he's like, oh boy, we have this article about every phase of Southern Pacific headlight packages ever applied to every locomotive. I'll be like, if you're excited, I'm excited, because if he's excited, then that means it's something that someone else is going to be excited about. I have published articles in Railfan that I've written or I've shepherded, and because it was something that was like near and dear to my heart, and I'm like, I'm going to give this the gold treatment, and maybe no one else will be into it, but at least the story is out there and the story's been told, because it's such an obscure niche, but we did the story right, and I'm proud of it. And those are the stories I get a lot of feedback on, things I'm shocked to get feedback on. I'm like, oh, you were into that because I'm into that, and I get feedback like, I never knew that this existed, and I don't even like commuter trains, but I liked the story you did. And I think people can tell when you're excited about, and when I say excited, when you're passionate about what you're writing, it comes through in the writing. And there are some great modelers out there, and I've seen great projects come across the pages of all our magazines. And some people are better at sharing that passion. It's tough, because I feel, especially when it comes to certain types of articles, some authors might feel if they don't describe every nut and bolt and tap and drill and 3/8 inch whatever, they're not telling the whole story. And then while they're describing how they tapped and drilled every detail part, they forgot to be like, cool, I attached the headlight on here, and then like the model finally came together because I finally put the headlight on here. It's but communicate that. Like, it sounds cheesy, but it's like, I bet I've had models I've scratch built, and I finally get to that point where it's like the model's not done yet, but you put that piece on, and it's like, finally, it looks like the thing that I had in my head, and oh, we're so close, and and I think you have to share that aha moment, because I think those were the things that would inspire me when I was younger. And I really think about what inspired me when I was young, when I was reading this stuff. And I'm talking about the articles in Model Railroader that were way over my head, and I wasn't drilling or tapping or airbrushing or Canon Cab Company anything, right? It's
Right.
but I was still reading it because I was amazed, and the more I read it, the more I understood. And there was a certain point where like these guys were like painting a project. It's like you could tell they fiddled with this Canon thin wall cab after they broke the first two that they bought, and they bought a third one, because they were called Canon thin wall cabs for a reason.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, and I finally put the headlight on, and I took the masking off, and the paint was really starting to come together. And it's like, yes, you have to describe, yes, my project's coming together. Yes, I finished the ballast on my layout and it looked awesome. Yes, I had my first operating session. Yes, I assembled my first Craftsman kit, and I put in the windows, and it finally looked like something. And if we don't share those happy, joyous moments, that like, this is a hobby, we're supposed to have fun. And I do understand that there is a lot of intense research, and for some people, the intensity is what they enjoy. Researching what type of shake shingle goes on the side of a Grand Trunk Western Depot, I don't know, or what diameter steel rod you make a grab iron from a Phase 2 Jeep 9. Again, I'm making up stuff. Don't write in and tell me I got the detail wrong. But that's what Harry Wong is going to be great at. Harry's going to be my technical detail guy. We were talking before, and I'm like, I'm going to help set the style and the tone, but really our readers are going to help determine, the cumulative the gestalt, the entirety of the thing is going to come from our readers. But if we don't start finding ways to express that joy and passion, then this just becomes a job. How many times do you walk down to your layout and you're like, forget this, I don't want to work on this tonight, this is too much work.
Yeah, exactly.
And you turn off the lights and you go home. And how many great layouts do we see abandoned halfway through because either they built the giant benchwork they thought they were supposed to build and it didn't work out, or they're halfway building their operations oriented layout and they realize they really aren't operations after all, or they're modeling the Burlington Northern and they realize that they have to get a fleet of SD40s together and they don't really like SD40s, or they're tired of looking at SD40s and they really want some SD9s, but they can't have SD9s because there weren't any SD9s on their railroad. And I think those are the things we have to, how many times we've fallen into that pit, right? Of, oh, I have to. When I was involved in the college club and new members would come in, I'm starting to age out here, and the new members are like, oh, what train should I buy? We'd be at a train show. Oh, what should I buy? Buy whatever you like. Well, what if it's not the right thing? What's the right thing?
Yeah.
Because, we told them that, the model railroad, the club is based on Western New York, and, they start running with that. They're like, oh, is this right? Is this the right era? Is this the right time frame? It's like, who cares? Just buy it.
Yeah.
Just buy what you like. Because I told them after a time of buying whatever catches your fancy and buying what you like, and you'll find that over time your interest will narrow. You'll start noticing you start buying a lot of one thing. And that's there. Now you notice you start buying a lot of Canadian Pacific stuff. Hey, maybe you're into CP Rail. Maybe that's what you're gonna model. Or maybe you just like red. Who cares? Like, enjoy yourself. I think an eye-opening experience for me. This is when I first met Lionel. Lionel was one of my heroes in model railroader, and I met him at the Hartford National Convention in 2009. He doesn't remember. He keeps trying to block it out, but I was on the convention committee for the Hartford National, and one of my jobs was to produce the home layout tour guide. And you know how that works. The guy sends out a survey, describe your layout, give me the direction, give me the address to your layout and all that. But it's like scale, size of layout, locale, what you model, description, and I'm not putting track plans. It's just a directory of name of the layout, name of the owner, how to get to his layout, and so on. And maybe about half the layouts I hadn't heard of, and the other half I was somewhat familiar with. And then there were a couple that were questionable that I knew should not have been on the tour. And not naming names, but let's just say, it was literally someone's 4x8 in a garage.
Right.
And the description made it sound like they were a huge basement empire modeling a specific era in a specific railroad. And knowing the guy, and he was a great guy, and he was a fun member of our division. Nothing against him personally, but it's like, that's your layout is not what you said it is, and it just made me wonder, did he feel pressured because of how he saw everyone else's layouts described? Did he want to fit in? Did he feel he had to put on all these titles of, oh, this is a proto-freelanced, Southern Pacific branch line with timetable and train order operation in the steam to diesel transition era. It's like, hey Joe, I know your layout. It's a 3x5 card table, and it's up against your golf clubs in the garage. It's but did he do that because he felt like that was the only way he could be accepted by these other model railroaders? Right. So this goes back to being honest with yourself. It's, you can enjoy this hobby any way you want, and you don't have to buy anything to join the club. You don't have to put on a title to join the club. You don't have to do anything except have a willingness to enjoy the hobby and share it with others. And I think that's really the only thing we should be worried about. And I think the hardest thing I will face as editor is someone coming up to me with their prize whatever, their first model they were finished, or they want me to feature their layout, or they have an idea for something, and I'm going to have to tell them it's not the right fit for us.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to break their heart and tell them, I'm sorry, your best wasn't good enough this time around. And it happens on the Railfan side too. I unfortunately have to reject photos from time to time, or we have to send back story ideas for revision. And I tell people, I'm like, hey, it's not that you took a bad photo. If the photo brings you joy, you took a great photo and you enjoy that photo. Unfortunately, I can't it's not suitable for publication.
Right.
You know, and I remember even I was working on projects I was helping a friend of mine work on a project, and he wanted to get it published in Craftsman, and I helped him submit it. And, they took a look at the models and they're like, you know what, this is nice paint, but it needs more details. It's not going to hold up under the scrutiny of the camera. And they weren't mean. They were absolutely right. They needed more details, but I wasn't going to tell my friend that. The editor had to tell him, So that's going to be the hardest thing for me to do, is to tell people in a way, it's not that your best isn't good enough, but your model might not hold up to the scrutiny of the camera, or your layout may need some touch up, to, I don't know. I don't like that. I'm struggling with the words right now. What do I tell this person?
Well, my favorite story is the very first photo I ever sent into Model Railroader. This is back around 1982 or something like that, going back 35 years. And Andy Sprand
was this when they used the glass plate negatives and you had to stand still for a half hour? And you fired off a big magnesium flash to take the photo? Is that it? I'm sorry, Lionel. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. You were telling a story.
No, and it's great that you're so prolific with your descriptions of how excited you are, because seeing as how this is the last time you'll ever be on the podcast, it's good to get.
I got to go out with a bang. That's it.
So, anyways, my first photo I ever sent to Model Railroader, Andy Sprandio, as associate editor, and he sent it back with a letter saying, "There's thanks for your submission, but it's in focus and all that, but there's no action in the photo." And of course, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, action? It's a still photo of models. How can I make action? Like, am I supposed to make it blurry or something? And, I eventually, sent a letter back or called him or something, and he described it to me. But that's how that's how you start, is you're going to have to get, I think the key is, do you get some sort of solid little bit of information? It's how you make the connection with people. And to finish your story about the 2000 the convention in Hartford, afterwards you came up to me at the convention. You came up to me very excited about all the maps and everything and the descriptions you made of the layouts, and you said to me, how do you like this? And I said, don't bother me, kid.
That's good.
I have a question. We were talking about getting the aha moment across, and I've noticed the change in the magazines over the year. Back when we used to love reading and getting all excited, it was all done in the first person narrative. And now there's been the change that Bob cut the sprue, Bob did this, Bob did that, and like a bunch of little pictures because people can't read anymore. In my mind, and because I'm an old guy, I think the first person narrative type approach is much more appealing, and I get more out of that than looking at a bunch of pictures that Bob did this, Bob did that. How do you see that?
I think it's important to understand more how an article is put together, and it could be that sometimes the person building the model feels so uncomfortable writing about it, he'll pair up with an author, and then sometimes the author is like, okay, well, I didn't build this, so I'm going to be Bob built this and Bob cut that. That's really something that an editor should massage for style. Recognize that Bob built the model, but Joe did the story, but perhaps rewrite the captions or the story in a way so that it doesn't sound like we just invited Joe into the room to do color commentary as Bob is cutting the sprue and painting the model, right? So I think that's really the editor's discretion of setting the tone and the style. I'd much rather hear how you built the model, then have someone else tell me how you built the model. And the biggest thing, I see someone and they're like, I'm no writer, I'm no author. And it's like, yeah, you are. You just tell the story to me exactly the way you just told it to me, on the phone or in person when we're talking here. You just write it down exactly like that, and I'll make sure when it gets to print, it's something readable. It's the editor's job to edit for style, for clarity, for grammar, things like that. Sometimes we get stories in at Railfan where I feel that they need a stronger introduction, or there might not be a strong conclusion. And we go back to the author and we say, hey, write a paragraph that explains how you got here. Or if it's an ending, write a paragraph explains how you left. But, either way, I always tell people, as long as your story has a beginning, middle, and an end, and we can follow it from the beginning, middle, and end, you've told the story. And if you're still not sure, you just do your best. You put the words on the paper and you get it to me, and we will work on it together. That's the editor's job, is to shepherd stories through to completion. And a lot of that I'm going to have Harry's going to be doing a lot of that development work, as he already did in the past. And, fortunately, I'll be able to share that responsibility. And that's what I'm looking forward to most.
And I think it's important for people to realize that it's the photographs that are the most important thing when they're submitting a story to a magazine, because without quality photographs, you can't really do anything. And that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part to learn. It's the hardest part to do, I think.
And one of the things we're actually looking to do, I'm looking to bring a photography column, a regular photography feature to the magazine, because I feel like there's people out there who are they're waiting to learn, or they want to be showed how to photograph models. And there's probably a lot of people being held back from submitting because they feel they don't have the right equipment. Can I tell you all a dirty secret about an article I submitted to Railroad Model Craftsman?
Certainly.
Absolutely. After I tell you,
Can
after I tell you that that's a great idea to have a photography, some sort of semi-regular photography thing, because it's a much easier to do photography now. So I mean, if you can tell people how to do it, you may open the floodgates to all sorts of things.
Sure.
No,
and that's what I'm hoping, is just give people the tools where they're not afraid to try for themselves, and then they might find that, what was holding them back wasn't holding them back at all. So back in June 2018, I had an article in Railroad Model Craftsman, part of our commuter layout series that I was working on with George Riley, and I did an article on how to kit bash some buildings for the layout. And it was sort of like a two-part story. In the first part of the story, I just built an Atlas passenger station stock. All I did was I painted the walls. I painted the parts before I assembled it to change the colors to make it a different building. But otherwise, I assembled it stock. So it's like, okay, I assembled the stock. I just changed the colors. The second part of the story was I kit bashed a lumber yard using a couple of Atlas lumber yards and a Lifelike general store. And it was a pretty simple kit bash. But again, it's just to show you didn't have to do anything crazy, just a couple of slight modifications to these kits. All of a sudden, you have a completely different building. And the whole time I'm building this, I pretty much just set up a little workbench on my kitchen table, and I had a giant piece of white, I want to call it oak tag, or I don't know what it was. It's a paper that has like a plastic sheen to it. It might not even be actual paper, but a very large 36-inch by 36-inch piece of heavy white paper. And occasionally I would stop what I was doing and I would photograph the steps. And I just photographed everything, not knowing what would be the final pics for the article, right?
right.
And also having that very large piece, I'll tell you, this is the simplest way, if you're photographing models, to get a continuous, what we call a seamless backdrop. You take this very large piece of white paper and you curve it so that part of it is leaned up against the wall and part of it is flat on your tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a continuous seamless backdrop, and you just have some strong lighting, and you're ready to go. So you're thinking I have some crazy studio setup here in the apartment. No, it's literally my kitchen table, a white piece of paper, and I photographed the entire project using my phone.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I had to do a little bit of trickery because what's great about the sensor on most smartphones, I'm using a Samsung S7, whatever, I think, I don't know, but I got it because it has a great 13 megapixel camera.
Right.
And the sensor does great with available light. So as long as you have a strong direct light source, in this case, it was my kitchen light, I was able to get very good, clear, sharp photos. Now, the drawback is the depth of field is very shallow. You can set your phone's camera to macro setting, get really close up for detail shots, and all that's great. But even off the macro setting, the trick is to keep the phone parallel to the plane of what you're shooting. Does that make sense? Because the farther back you let your subject recede into the background, the less of it's going to be in focus. So it's not a perfect solution, but almost everyone has a smartphone in their pocket these days. You already have a pretty decent camera.
Yeah.
Start using that. Start experimenting with that. And I found there are these clip-on lights you can get. They're battery powered, and they clip right onto your phone. And now you have a bright LED light source to photograph your models. So I think I just wrote our first article for the photography column.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking the same thing.
But again,
Wow.
And
I'm trying to break down that you don't need fancy tools to do this work, and I think if we can just share some of that, because
absolutely.
I don't want anyone to feel shut out from participating in the hobby, like my friend who thought he had to puff up the description of his layout to be included.
Yeah, exactly. And the byline, I think, on that article will be, of course, Otto Vondrak, Lionel Strang, Tony Cook, Bruce Kelly. We all had a part in it.
I'm just going to list you guys under et al. I just don't know which one of you is Al.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Okay, I just have a quick question before we get to you, Bruce, Mr. Kelly. So do you take photos with do you take photographs with your phone, or do you answer phone calls with your camera?
When I do it right, I'm not sure.
Okay, Kelly, go ahead.
The question I have is, since you've taken up, both you and Tony have taken on these many hats, what's the difference between an associate editor or managing editor and an editor?
Good question. Depending on how deep the staff is, the editor is usually short for editor-in-chief, and then beneath him will be a managing editor, and then beneath him might be more than one associate editor.
Okay.
So depending on how deep your bench is, the editor might be the liaison between management and his managing editor, and the managing editor might handle the day-to-day work interacting with the associate editors, and then in turn the associate editors are the ones working with contributors. So it really just depends on how deep your bench is. In the case of Railfan and Railroad, Steve Berry is the editor. I'm the associate editor, and I'm also the art director, which means I do all the layout design. In the case of Railroad Model Craftsman, I'm going to be the editor. Harry K. Wong is the associate editor, and Todd Gillette is our graphic designer doing all the layout. And quite frankly, this setup is working well for us. If we find that we're growing and we need to add more people, we might add more associate editors, for instance. It really depends on how we handle the workflow to this point. And I've been talking with Harry and Todd about how we'll intake articles, how we'll slate them for future issues, how the editing process will go, who gets a first pass when it goes out to the proofreaders, and so on and so forth. These are all things to consider. So usually the number of titles just depends on how deep your bench is.
Mhm.
So our company is relatively small. I don't think that's a secret. White River Productions is a small family company. That doesn't mean that we are weak or we have disadvantages. It just means that we just do the job with fewer people. I don't feel like we're understaffed, and I don't feel like we're at a disadvantage. And that's not to say that other companies are doing it good or bad. It's just a different way. If you see another magazine and they have 20 people on the masthead, that's just how they do business. It doesn't make it good, bad, or indifferent. So in our case, we're doing it with 3 people. Railfan does it with 2 people. I'm sorry, I've been remiss. At Railfan, we did hire a news editor. We hired a full-time news editor because when I was at Railfan, one of my jobs was also to be the news editor, and that was one straw too many. And
Okay, time out.
yeah,
Hold on here, sport. Yeah. So being the news editor was too much, but taking on an entire magazine, that's okay.
oh yeah, piece of cake, piece of cake. No, but in the workflow of Railfan, it was one straw too many because we had a news editor who had left, and then I was managing. Our news section is written by several different contributors. Plus, I'm going out to find news photos. Plus, I was writing the preservation news, and it was just too much. And I said, this isn't gonna work. You're not going to get the level of quality you're expecting here. And we found a full-time news editor. So right now the hierarchy is Steve Barry as editor, myself as associate editor, and I'm managing our news editor, Eric Berger, who does a great job, by the way. Eric, if you're listening, good job.
Yeah, way to go, Eric. We're with you, buddy.
So, but no, that's what the difference is. And I think looking back at old issues of Railroad Model Craftsman, and I mean old from like the 40s and 50s, Charles Penn listed himself as the editor and publisher. And I don't think he was having as much day-to-day interaction in the content of the magazine. I think he was the last set of eyes that would review the publication before it went to press.
Right.
And I think he was handling more the business end. And the Thompson brothers at one time or another, and then later Hal Carson's, when they were named managing editors, I think those were the guys who were actually setting the tone and the content of the magazine. So sometimes a title is just a title. Sometimes people just assume a title just to indicate that.
Sure.
Sometimes you're an army of one. You're the editor.
Yeah. Well, we have a staff of dozens here at the old
Thousands.
AML. Yeah,
Hundreds.
Yeah.
So
Hundreds of thousands.
yeah. So just now that you're the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman and the associate editor of Railfan and Railroad, like, what are you pulling down? Like $200K a year?
Yes. I just don't know which year yet.
All right, boys, we're getting towards the end of this. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Mr.
I have one question that's been thinking all day. I'm assuming, of course, when you got the news, you went to Dogtown to celebrate.
Yes, I did make my way eventually. Dogtown is a popular local establishment just around the corner from the new head office here in Rochester. It's a hot dog emporium where they do serve many, many tasty hot dogs.
And you were pretty excited that day, young fella.
It was actually, you'll enjoy this, Lionel. One of the first people to congratulate me on my new position was my cousin, Ed Vondrak.
Oh. So Ed Vondrak, the fellow that did all those track plans for Model Railroader?
Yes. Yes, he's a retired college professor. He's still living out in Indianapolis area, and we've been talking from time to time. And he's like, if I recall, back a bunch of years, this was something that you were aiming for. And I said, indirectly, I still don't know how I got here, but I guess you could say, all this work I've put in over the years kind of brought me here. And in no small part, I owe a great debt to Kevin and Nadine Udaly, the owners of White River Productions, for giving me this opportunity, because ultimately they call the shots. It's their company,
Well,
and
sure.
I don't take that lightly. But also, it's like I told a bunch of people, when I first broke the news. It's like, if you know me, I'm sorry. I mean, but if you don't know me, I hope I can earn your trust, because I really take this job seriously, and I want to make a magazine that we can all be proud of and that everyone wants to contribute to.
You're going to do an awesome job. You're going
definitely.
to do an absolutely awesome job. Now, so I thought your father was Ed Vondrak.
Yes, he was, but not the Ed that you're thinking of.
So it's a different Ed.
Different Ed. And funny story, when I submitted my first manuscript to Railroad Model Craftsman, to Bill Schomburg, and I submitted all the materials and I packed up all the slides. I said, he's like, I got your package today. Everything looks great. This is good text. I'll let you know when we're working on the story. Also, by the way, tell your dad I say hello. I think last time I saw him was at an NMRA convention a few years ago. And I paused. We're talking on the phone, and I'm like, oh, yeah, Bill, not that Ed, different Ed. Yeah. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not my dad. And I'm pretty sure that the only reason that I have the editor's job today is because Bill Schomburg made that fatal mistake of publishing me 20 years ago.
Well, there you go.
So thank you, Ed Vondrak, wherever you are, both of them.
So how old is the new editor of Railroad Model Craftsman?
Well, you have to cut me open and count my rings.
Yeah.
I will be 42 this summer.
So that's cool too. So they've got a young progressive guy.
Yeah.
That's aware of the new world, because there's
Yeah,
no. So I got one question. So
Yes.
I see that they're printed digitally now. They're
Yes.
available digitally now. Is that going to become a big thing in the future, do you think?
So both Railfan and Railroad Model Craftsman have been available digitally since 2011, and I think we had this discussion before. Initially, we saw a huge spike, and then it leveled off. And the philosophy was back 10 years ago was that digital would one day overtake print, and print would become a novelty. And really, the opposite is true, because it is now so easy and so inexpensive to publish. We're seeing more books and magazines than we ever have.
Okay.
And in our particular case, I don't think you will ever see print go away. Even if you see a higher adoption of digital in the future, I still think at the end of the day, people want to pick up a magazine and page through it. They want to see that track plan and trace their finger on it. They want to see that structure drawing and start gluing pieces to it. It's I just don't think it's ever going to go away, because I think it's a different transmission medium.
Yeah,
to use
exactly.
a fancy word.
Well, and you've got lots to learn. There's lots to, like I said, I think the best example is like what I said with Joe Fugate. Like, there is no opportunity in the Model Railroad Press to have this kind of discussion with the new editor of Railroad Model Craftsman. You wouldn't publish this in the magazine. There's no other place to do it. And it's a new form that's been added to the hobby. It's an opportunity now for people to get to know you better and possibly enjoy the magazine more.
The closest I've ever seen to a discussion like this, if any of you have it in your collection, the 50th anniversary issue of Model Railroader, which also coincided with NMRA convention in Milwaukee, and they printed a roundtable discussion as part of the.
I remember that,
and it was very prescient, because Russ Larson, the publisher, he more or less predicted, like the iPad. He said by 2008 there's going to be a digital way to read magazines on a tablet. And the model he was thinking more was like a cartridge you would buy at a digital newsstand, because it's 1984. Not really thinking about how computer networks and cellular networks would develop. Who could foresee that? But the fact that he really hit the nail on the head. He said, 2008, you'll have the ability to read on a portable tablet. And I remember, in the roundtable discussion, someone stood up and they're like, "Will print ever go away?" And he's like, maybe by the time I retire, in 25 years or whatever, but also he said something, or someone on the roundtable said, I think you'll always want to have a physical copy because it'll be really hard to solder on a tablet.
Exactly.
It's funny when you mention that on the technology things, because one of my other interests is home video, and we've talked about it on this show at various times on things. But when laser discs were new and the ability to store information, both like the U.S. government and like I think there's a Sears 1981 catalog, the whole idea was, oh wow, you're going to just have this disc. You'll put this disc on. It'll have video. It'll have the text. This is going to change everything, and it'll make print obsolete. And it's like, well, print has outlived the laser disc.
And same thing about CD-ROMs too, right, Tony?
Yeah,
Remember CD-ROMs?
That again, yeah, I was going to say, and then the successor was, no, wait a minute, not Laserdisc, but a CD-ROM. It's going to change everything. It'll make all this obsolete. And it's like, a lot of stuff got done on CD-ROMs, and there was like that Philips CD interactive system again. It was like encyclopedias and things. So it's always this, wow, this is a whole new way to do this that's going to make the other obsolete. And it's surprising how many of those things end up on this heap of, oh yeah, it's just dead technology now, or no, nobody does that.
Okay, tying
all good ideas,
tying the two together then, and I'm sure the question's been asked before, and we'll ask again. Is there a future of RMC on PDFs on DVDs that people can download the whole collection or get the whole collection?
Probably not. It's something we looked at, and aside from having incomplete archives for various reasons, producing those PDFs are very expensive. We haven't really found a model that works where we could offer that in an economical format. How about that?
Sure.
That's really the biggest drawback. And unfortunately, our digital editions only go back to 2011. So at least there's that partial library. It's something we've gone round and round about, but we haven't found an economically viable solution.
But certainly a topic. It's one that, I'll buy the first copy that we produce. I'd love to have it myself. And I know Bruce Wilson and I have talked about it a number of times, and I'd love to have it. But who's got that extra 2 or 3 days a week that they can sit and scan page after page of old RMCs to make it happen. So,
but the funny thing about all that though is what I'll do. I'll take a PDF and I'll print it so I have a hard copy to look at.
There you go. Right.
Ooh, I like that print. All right,
print.
Now I can take it up and read in bed. Yeah.
You're not kidding me about that thing about they're still considering the Railfan Railfan. You're not kidding me about that, are you?
It's in committee. Top men are working on it.
Okay. All right.
Top men.
Top men.
This has been pretty cool, Otto. I got to tell you, buddy.
I really appreciate everyone's support. It's very nerve-wracking to be in this position. I mean, really thinking about. Always thought about this in oblique terms, right? Oh, it would be cool to be editor, and I have all these ideas. It'd be great to do this. And now, actually, this must be what it feels like to take office anywhere, right? And you walk in and you pick up your predecessor's files, you try to piece together what was going on, and then you try to get in touch with your staff and try to make things happen, and you try to reach out to new people, and it's all it can be very daunting. So if you're out there listening in podcast land, I hope you'll give me the chance to acclimate, but know that I'm excited to take this forward. I'll probably see some of you this summer at the NMRA convention in Salt Lake City. Look forward to seeing you there. And please don't be shy. Get in touch with us through our website, which is rrmodelcraftsman.com. You'll find our contact information there. Love to hear from you, and I want to hear your story ideas, and we want to get you published.
Wow, cool. I don't have much to say to that. That's very eloquent.
And guys, when we're done here, I'm having a party at my place. I got a bunch of shrimp I picked up earlier.
Excellent.
I really like that idea about having a column about photography or an occasional column or occasional article about that, because I think that's exactly, because it's a lot easier to do photographs now, and it's like, why not tell everybody?
And the tools are different. Like I remember shooting my first story, and I shot it on film, and I followed someone's step-by-step instructions, and it worked perfectly. And some of the techniques have changed with digital, but I think it's important that we look at all aspects, and not ignore, some of the new technology coming on.
So what is the circulation of Railroad Model Craftsman right this minute?
I actually do not know. I don't have that number.
Oh, come on.
He has staff look after that.
Wait. Bruce, do you read it?
Bruce?
Which Bruce?
Which one?
Well, either one.
Yeah.
I do.
I do not have the latest one handy.
Lionel, do you read it?
I do.
Oh, yeah, cover to cover.
Tony, do you read it?
I see it every once in a while on the newsstands, and I think about buying it. I think I probably will subscribe.
All right, so I can
at least
safely
4
say,
then, right?
I was going to say 4. More than 4.
More than 4. Well, hold on. It'd be 5 because you read it as well, right? Well, you probably get yours comp, don't you?
No, they make me buy 2. Isn't that weird? No, just kidding.
All right, that's it. We're done. Oh,
Now you guys are just getting silly.
Yeah, no, this is turning it. This is deteriorating into silliness.
Someone's already hitting the fast forward button on their player.
Yeah,
right now anyway.
Yeah.
Tom Jacobs. I know Tom Jacobs hasn't turned it off, or Boston Joe hasn't turned it off, but I'm concerned about Tracy Boyd. Tracy, don't turn it off just because we've gotten silly. I met this lady at where were we?
Springfield.
I met this lady. She came up to me and she was like, she's a model where there's more women in the hobby. This hobby is going to...
They're hiding, and for good reason. They're hiding.
This hobby is going to explode. This hobby is going to explode because of now we have access to it. Everybody has access to it.
Right.
All right. Bruce?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, you know what? Kelly, just sit down. Because this is such an important interview, and because we're dealing with the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman, I think we should have Bruce, the moderately agitated mail boy, give out the address.
Classic.
Oh, I'm glad. Take it, Bruce. Oh.
You can write us at P.O. Box 123, Station A, Boston Knuckle, Kentucky. Oh, the email address, you mean? Oh. Yes, because we're all hip and using the newfangled technology.
Yeah.
Our email address is modelerslife, modelers with 1 L, modelerslife@gmail.com.
We got a real tough job for you. This is going to show your prowess, Mr. Vondrak. This is going to show your prowess of how to create text and be creative as the editor of a new magazine. At the appropriate moment, you'll find out what you have to do.
Okay.
We also have a website called themodelerslife.com. If you go there, you can find links to our Facebook page and our Patreon page, which I'm sure, Otto, you've listened to all of those particular podcasts. You have
Sure
listened.
have.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're the winners of the JLWII 2000 Award, Best Podcast. So if you go to our website, amodelerslife.com, you'll find out everything you need to know right there. So now, are you ready? Oh, I guess we got 2 things we got to do. Well, I'm very confused about this.
Uh-oh.
I guess this is just really a regular interview, isn't it? If it's episode 116.
It is.
Yeah, so
It's a regular exclusive interview.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have to go with the standard, it's happy rails to you.
Happy rails to you.
Not yet.
Oh, dang it.
Apparently, he has not listened to all the podcasts.
Yeah. There's a couple he's missed.
But again, there's so many variations. He's unsure.
Yeah.
That's okay. I was just excited to tell all my friends I was on Hockey Night in Canada. So,
all right.
Yeah. There's a few podcasts that he's missed. Well, Otto, as the sun slowly sets over the back 40 and we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
happy rails to you.
It's another Lincoln Homer.